Hello and welcome to the third ICOM UK lunchtime event with a focus on protecting cultural heritage under threat. My name is Christian Bars and I'm the co-chair of the UK National Committee of ICOM. There are many situations that can pose a risk to heritage, both movable and immovable, accidents, natural disasters, but also deliberate destruction. We've seen many museums and their collections destroyed. One of the most highly publicized cases was the recent fire at the National Museum of Brazil. One of ICOM's focus points has been, over many years, to assist with planning for emergencies and assisting with recovery from disasters. Naturally, this includes providing help in times of war, recently in Syria and currently in Ukraine. The current series has focused on protecting cultural heritage in Ukraine. The talks are intended to identify simple steps for cultural heritage professionals to introduce into their everyday practice to support Ukraine. For future events, we plan to focus on other parts of the world where cultural heritage is in danger. This inaugural series of events has been developed in conjunction with the Ukrainian Institute London and the Ukrainian Institute in Kiev. The first talk on the ICOM Red Lists was held in November, and since then, the Red List for Ukraine has been published. It's available for free on the ICOM website, and we'll put a link in the chat for this event. The second talk on decolonizing our understanding of Ukraine and the Russian Empire was held a couple of weeks ago on the 30th of November. Recordings for both of these talks and the one today will be available on YouTube. And again, we'll put a link in the chat here. The talks are all free for anyone to access, but we do encourage everyone to make a donation, which we will pass on to our friends and colleagues at ICOM Poland, who have a fund to support Ukrainian museum professionals fleeing the war in Ukraine. Again, we'll put a link in the chat for anyone who may wish to make a donation today. You can choose any amount. We recommend a minimum of £5, but any amount will help. The talks have been moderated and organised by Maria Blazinski, whom it's my pleasure to introduce now. Maria is a UK-based heritage consultant and independent curator, specialising in exhibitions and interpretation. Maria has Ukrainian heritage and is helping ICOM UK to coordinate initiatives that support museums in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Christian, for the introduction. We've got a full programme today, and it's an honour to welcome our speakers. And on top of that, I'd like to say, I'm not going to pronounce this very well, but Laskarvo prosimo do nashisku druzi v Ukraini. That's a very poor way of saying welcome to our friends in Ukraine, because we know that there are people who are joining us from Kiev today. We have a full programme today, and it's an honour to welcome our speakers. We have Ludmila Pekarska, who is the curator of the Shevchenko Library and Archive in London. We have Maria Saluk, a paintings conservator from Lviv, who is currently based in Norfolk, and Anna Yanchenko from Anna Yanenko, Deputy Head of the Scientific and Research Division of History and Archaeology at the National Preserve Kiev-Peshchersk Lavra. Of course, being joined by our colleagues and friends in Ukraine does depend on their electricity supplies and internet connections, so we're grateful for them to join us today if they are able. We're also grateful to Olesia Kremeychuk, who's the director of the Ukrainian Institute in London, and Tetiana Filevska, creative director of the Ukrainian Institute in Kiev. Both Olesia and Tetiana have been instrumental in supporting this programme of talks. So first, some housekeeping. We've turned off cameras and we've muted mics for those watching the talks. We ask you to keep the mics muted. But we do welcome questions, observations, recommendations for further information on events or events that you know about. So please share those in the chat. There will be chance for question and answers at the end. So the session, so please do leave those for us too. The session's being recorded for the ICOM UK website. The theme of today's talk is identifying and collecting Ukrainian cultural heritage. So why protect and why collect Ukrainian cultural heritage in the UK and beyond? What artefacts are collectible? How might existing collections be developed? Where can we find relevant expertise to identify Ukrainian objects that might already be in our museums? This knowledge could be invaluable when the time comes to rebuild and replace collections in Ukraine that have been damaged or lost as a result of the war. It's a pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Ludmila Pekarska, curator of the Shevchenko Library and Archive in London since 2001. The library is the largest archive of Ukrainian artifacts in Europe outside of Ukraine. Ludmila was born in Ukraine, but she graduated from the Taras Shevchenko Kiev State University in the Department of History and Archaeology. She holds a PhD degree for a doctoral dissertation on lost art of Kievan treasures of the 10th and 13th centuries. Ludmila worked at the National Museum of Ukraine and then at the British Museum in London in the medieval department from 1991 to 2000. She was a Whitney Fund Fellow and continued her research at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, as well as other museums in the USA. Ludmila is also the author of a number of articles on the art of Kiev Rus and 2 monographs. The Silver Hoard of Marinovka, Ukraine, from the 6th to the 7th centuries. That's an English translation. It was published in Innsbruck in 1994. That was written in collaboration with a colleague from the British Museum, David Kidd. And also Jewellery of Princely Kiev, the Kiev Hoards of the British Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Related Material. As well as caring for a unique collection of books about Ukraine and the Ukrainian diaspora, she maintains links with academic institutions and museums in Ukraine and has organised successful joint projects with them and still organises events, book launches and other cultural events today. Today, Ludmila will introduce the Shevchenko Library and Archive. The floor is now yours, Ludmila.
Thank you very much for introduction, Maria, and thank you to be part of this program. I'm not speaking from Ukraine, but I am at a Ukrainian place in Britain. And people who created this library, they already experienced war many years ago and collected all these things that survive today. And I would like to tell you about this library a little bit. So let me begin by saying that in the early 1940s, thousands of Ukrainians were based in the UK as part of the Canadian and United States military forces engaged in the Second World War. They were mainly descendants of Ukrainians who had previously immigrated to North America, and after the war, most of them returned to their countries with their units. Furthermore, some 1,000 Ukrainians, citizens of pre-war Poland, were deployed in the UK during the Second World War as members of the Polish armed forces under British command. In August 1945, Ukrainians from the Polish armed forces formed an initiative committee which went on to create the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain. And you can see the participant of this meeting. It was first general meeting held in January 1946 in Edinburgh. A library was first founded in 1946 at 2018 Sussex Gardens. At that time, the building served as the headquarters of the Ukrainian Relief Bureau. Before that, it had been the center of Ukrainian community life of the Ukrainian Canadian servicemen during the war. After the war had ended, the Ukrainian Canadian servicemen welcomed the Polish Armed Forces Ukrainians to access and use the property at Sussex Gardens. With the establishment of the Association of Ukrainians, the small library and its reading room effectively came into being. Records show that 12 people a day visited it. And here's, I show deliberately this picture because it's we've been involved in this project, and it's located in St. James Church next to the 2018 Sussex Gardens. And you see this inscription, "I was a stranger and you gave me shelter." So this glass window was devoted to Ukrainians who came here after Second World War, and Great Britain gave them a shelter. And today the history is repeating. And what a great country, Great Britain, that with open arms she gave a shelter many Ukrainians today. In mid-1947, the library relocated at its current site at 49 Linden Gardens, Notting Hill. In those early days, the library consisted of a book collection donated by Ukrainian Canadian Servicemen Association and of material donated by ex-servicemen of the Ukrainian division. The library went through various periods of both growth and decline, depending on the extent of its operational capabilities, as they change from time to time. Many distinguished Ukrainians worked to establish and develop the library. Among them, Dr. Petro Kovalev, a lawyer from Switzerland and diplomat, Petro Yuzek, who was a doctor of law, a member of Canadian Senate, Victor Svoboda, professor of the School of Slavonic and East European Studies, London University, Professor Volodymyr Shayan, philosopher and philologist, and expert of Sanskrit and European literature, Professor Robert Lisowski, well-known historian Petro Kuryny, Alexa Varapai, ethnographer, writer, and many, many others. In the early 1960s, Association of Ukrainians initiated and coordinated activities to mark two significant Taras Shevchenko anniversaries. In 1961, the centenary of the poet's death, and in 1964, the 150th anniversary of his birth. At the UGB board of directors took the decision to honor Ukraine's great national poet and outstanding master of Ukrainian painting and graphic art by assigning his name to the library, so that this institution would work and be a living monument to Taras Shevchenko. The collection of the Shevchenko Library and Archive can be described as one of the most valuable assets of the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain. It includes the following: book collection, periodical, and newspapers. And the library's value and uniqueness lies in the fact that the majority of publications from various fields of knowledge were published at different times in the West and were unavailable and inaccessible to scholars in Soviet Ukraine. The library has over 35,000 volumes covering a range of subjects: history of Ukraine, politics and culture, scientific publication, rare emigre publication, Ukrainian periodicals of the West, approximately 250 titles, history of Ukrainian immigration to Europe, Canada, United States, Australia, publication of Ukrainian academic centers of the West, encyclopedic references and other books, in addition to old prints dating back to 17th century. Many editions contain autograph and gift inscription of Ukrainians, scientists, writers, and poets. The library also has a complete set of extremely rare collection of the scientific monthly edition of Kievska Storona, which was the first published in Kiev in 1882. The publication focused on Ukrainian history, ethnography, and literature, and brought together the most prominent Ukrainian academic and literature figures to the time. In 1906, the magazine was banned, and this is the only completed set in UK. The archive contains minimum 10,000 pages. It's original material, manuscript, documents, correspondence, and photographs of prominent Ukrainian cultural, literary, academic, and political figures. The archive is currently being merged with archival material of the Association of Ukrainians, which include details, annual reports, and minutes from 1945 to the present. This alone, in addition to the full collection of Ukrainska Dumka, a weekly newspaper published by Association from November 1945, provides an invaluable resource of the history and development of the Ukrainian community in UK. Presently, beyond returning to the library's collection back to its home surrounding and 49 Linden Gardens, following a complete redevelopment of the site, work is nearing its conclusion on publication of the archives of two prominent Ukrainian historians. It's Professor Polonska-Vasylenko and Professor Shcherbakivsky, who lived and worked in exile in the West after the end of the Second World War. Library has a large photographic collection, which you have seen now, a couple of them, and also Ukrainian philately section founded in 1971 by Theodore Fedishin, and he prepared the first exhibition of Ukrainian postage stamps in England. And second major exhibition, The World of Ukrainian Postage Stamps, was held in the library in 2005. Library has a big art collection. This includes paintings, icons, sculptures, lithographs, posters, 19th century pictures, postcards, which include works by Elena Kulchitska. You can see two of her work, Hutsul and Hutsulka from Old Kossi, and also Ambrosi Zhdacha and many other Ukrainian illustrators and artists. And they not only present like famous artists, they also present largest publishing houses of the time, such as Chas, Drukar, Zvin, Krynytsia. Painting includes the artworks of prominent Ukrainian artists, such as Ivan Trush, this is one of his paintings, Miron Levitsky, Alexei Novakivsky, Mykola Krichevsky, and many other famous names. Among the sculptures where there are works by Elizaveta Skaropatska, the daughter of last Ukrainian hetman, Mikhail Chereshnyovsky, and the largest collection of sculpture in Europe of Gregor Kruk. This latter collection was presented for the first time at the Great Sculptural Salon in Kyiv, and after that in National Art Gallery in Lviv, 2010. And here you see the Sculptural Salon in Kyiv, and the third poster is a sculpture by Gregor Kruk.
Hi, Ludmila. This is Maria. Just to give you, just to say there's 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to say that the library participates in various scientific, cultural, and historical projects, organizing exhibition and public lecture and talks on various Ukrainian-related themes. It goes without saying that Ukrainians in the UK are an understudied migrant group, and in this regard, the uniqueness of the library is of huge significance across many areas of research and audience engagement. The library strives to serve students, graduates, postgraduates, and researchers as an original source of references material and helping with many topics related to the Ukrainian question and the life and activities of Ukrainians in Great Britain. I can say some examples, but well,
Thanks.
Thank you for your attention. I don't think we have time for more. I just show you some just highlights, but I hope people who want to visit us, they're very welcome. They can see much, much more than I could say today. Thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Ludmila. I'm so pleased that you were able to introduce such an important resource that's available in the UK. I think not many people know that it exists, so we really, really appreciate your introduction. And my father was one of the people who I think helped to set up or helped to broaden the archive after the Second World War. So I was looking very closely at your photographs to see whether there was a photo of him in there.
Yeah, this is the generation who created that.
Indeed. And it's we should probably point out to people who may not realize that Shevchenko, the name Taras Shevchenko, it's named after the famous poet of Ukraine and not the footballer.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you very much. So now I'd like to introduce our second speaker. I'm just getting my notes here. Apologies. So yes, so just to mention, to introduce our second speaker, so Maria Saluk, who is a Ukrainian conservator. She's currently working in Norfolk with the Kiffy Stainer Hutchins and Company Fine Art Conservators. Today, Maria will tell us about her work as a conservator of religious icons in Ukraine. Over to you, Maria. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this beautiful opportunity to be here now and to talk about thing we are proud of. So my name is Maria Saluk. I'm painting conservator from Ukraine. I worked with one of the biggest collections of icons in Ukraine, so I would like to make them the subject of my story today. And I'm so sorry. I have oh, I'm terribly sorry.
Can you remember how to do it, Maria?
Yeah, no. It's I'm sorry. There's something wrong with my computer. Can maybe someone? Can I ask Dana to open my presentation for me? I'm so sorry for that.
I actually don't. I can't open
Okay.
it for you. So you'll, if you can see the green button.
Yes. Yes, of course, I'm doing it.
I'll see if I can open the presentation you sent me as a backup.
I'll try my best. I'm so sorry. Yes. So, icon painting.
Maria, we can't see your slides.
Oh, you
It
can't.
is screen sharing, but unfortunately we can't see the slides. So you might have to stop it and open your presentation and then try screen sharing again, see if that maybe works.
Yes, of course. No?
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
Sorry for that. Icon painting occupied an important place in Ukrainian culture because until 17th century, most paintings were on religious topics. So to understand Ukrainian fine art, it is important to understand Ukrainian icon. Since since the conversion of Kiev Rus in 10th century, which was powerful state within the capital of Kiev that occupied the territory of modern Ukraine. This was considered as political move in order to establish stronger relations with the West. So we can say with confidence that Ukraine has always been oriented towards the Western world. However, geographically, it is at crossroads between the West and the East. This resulted in a unique combination of Byzantine schematism and symbolism, but with tendency towards the Western style and with greater freedom and narrative. The aesthetics are not so strict. The lines are smoother and the faces are kinder and more open. The style of Ukrainian icon changed all the time. However, the technique was quite traditional and stayed the same until 17th century. It was a painting on board with egg tempera, with a wonderful gilded background made with patterns. Sometimes silver was used. Sometimes they were colored with varnishes, and sometimes it was used charbon to make a golden color for silver as well. Faces and hands were painted by filling and background with umber and ochre strokes, and details were unlighted. This created the bold effect, making the figures stand out against the pattern background. The drapery of poses was sometimes decorated with gold. Very briefly about history. Before the Christianity era of Kiev Rus, ornamental images prevailed in visual art, but here we begin to see the images of figures. A beautiful example of the art of Kiev monument is the Cathedral of Sophia of Kiev, dated to the 11th century. In addition to beautiful images of saints, we see also the king or knyaz with his family, and general time, a day of life around. Around 13th century, Kiev experienced a crisis due to frequent attacks from the east. So painting school of Western Ukraine became the main ones. But it is important to know that in the 15th, 18th centuries, artists had to belong to an art workshop in the city in order to study and to sell the works. The Ukrainian or Orthodox workshops was very actively oppressed by Polish Catholics. So Ukrainian artists often moved outside the city where they felt freer. This resulted in phenomenon of folk icons, which were made by non-professional artists for less money, as you can see it here. These icons are based around religious narratives, but the symbolism is not so strict. Despite the naivety, these icons have a special charm, openness, and more positive feel. It seems to me that it says a lot about the mentality, freedom-loving and positive perception of religion felt by the Ukrainian people. Another unique trend in Ukrainian iconography is the Carpathian Mountains. Look at this cheerfulness and love in these icons. These icons are made at glass, painted in glass. The icons of Zaporizhia are also very interesting. They are made without any ground and also very colorful and open. As in Western Europe, Ukrainian Baroque is rich in gold, carving, and dynamic lines, but it preserves its Byzantine roots, spirit, and aesthetic. Especially interesting is Cossack Baroque, of the Cossack who ruled the territory of Ukraine in the 17th century. They were frequent donors of icons to churches, and the Baroque style developed significantly during this time. We can see their images on the icons, as you can see it here. We can also see the saints depicted in the clothes of that time. The icons gravitates towards Western aesthetic, but retains the schematicity in the structure of figures, faces, hands, etc. Another important niche of Ukrainian sacral art is, of course, churches. These are wooden churches of that time. They are very special and important, but they definitely need another separate conversation. But I just wanted to show you, yes, this is a church from Western Ukraine, and these are wall paintings from this church. They are gorgeous. Also, important point to note in the study of icon painting in Ukraine and Eastern Europe in general is iconostasis, structures consisting of icons placed in the strict hierarchy and decorated with rich carving which are often gilded. The icons are arranged in several levels and designed to illustrate the main religious motifs. I want to show you this example of early 18th century Bohorochanski iconostasis made in the city of Zhokwa in Western Ukraine by the artist Jochen Zelevich. It was very strong and beautiful iconographic school this time there. So yes, you can see details of this iconostasis. This trend continues. We see how the icon gravitates towards Western aesthetic, but retains unique, identical schematicity and silhouettes. As you may know, according to Byzantine rite, the idea was that we don't know what the saints looked like, so depicting them and humanizing them was thought to be sacrilege. So they are painted in symbolic way, and professional painters use schematic shapes. But as you can see here, we're already very influenced by Western methods. So here we can compare two 18th century icons. One was painted by Ukrainian artists, the other a Russian artist. The Ukrainian artist is clearly more influenced by European and Western art. The clothes conveyed the fashion of the time, decorated with flowers and ornaments, while the Russian, or for example, other country, Eastern European countries, icons are keeping this traditional dogma, while Ukrainian icon is more three-dimensional, but with the preservation of the schematism, construction of the faces, of the hands and the figures. So, in conclusion, Ukrainian iconography is special and unique in its independence. At the crossroads of cultures, mentalities, and visions of aesthetics, the painting style is very decorative, colorful, warm, and inviting, making Ukrainian icons unique. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
That's so fascinating, and leads on very nicely from what Ludmila was talking about, the collections and the archive there, and also links very closely with the ICOM Red List as well, because religious icons are mentioned in the Red List too. So I've put a link to the ICOM Red List, which are available free to download. I've put a link in the chat for those too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a fascinating presentation. Really, really appreciate that. Finally, we're delighted to be able to show a presentation from the National Preserve Kiev Peshchersk Lavra. This is about a project to digitize their collection. The National Preserve is part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Kiev St. Sophia Cathedral and related monastic buildings in Kiev-Peshchersk, Lavra, and one of the largest museums in Ukraine. Its collection includes over 72,000 objects of history, culture, and art, unique items which are currently under threat. It also consists of 140 historical and cultural monuments, including 2 unique underground complexes, churches, architectural monuments of the 11th and 19th centuries, and other exhibition spaces. The presentation has been made possible by Anna Yanenko, who's the Deputy Head of the Scientific and Research Division of History and Archaeology at the National Preserve. I've been looking on the participants and haven't been able to see her name mentioned so far. Obviously, her attendance here today depends on electrical and internet supplies, but she will be able to see our recorded presentation. We're really pleased that she was able to present this. But I do see that Anastasia Cherednichenko is part of amongst the participants, so perhaps we may have a chance to ask her a few questions after this. So I'm passing now on to Dana to be able to show the pre-recorded presentation.
The National Preserve Kiev-Peshchersk Lavra is the largest museum complex in Ukraine. It is more than 100 buildings with historical and cultural value, including 2 unique underground cave complexes and temples. The preserve also has a large museum collection, more than 70,000 items of storage, works of painting, metalwork objects, sculptures, rare textile items, archaeological artifacts, photos, all printed books, clichés, plans, maps, documents, etc. Until the 24th of February, we also had several museum expositions where masterpieces of Ukrainian art were presented. The main activity areas of the National Preserve are conservation, research, and popularization of historical, cultural, and artistic heritage objects. Digitalization of movable and immovable objects of historical and cultural heritage is one of the strategic and priority directions of our institution work. Because in the condition of the war unleashed by Russia, all objects of tangible and intangible cultural heritage in Ukraine are at risk now. Currently, we have a large project on the digitalization of historical and cultural heritage objects, which are taken care of by the preserve. We are looking for the possibility of 3-dimensional scanning of architectural monuments, thanks to the supported grant submitted jointly by the Preserve, ICOM UK, and the University of the West of England. Condition for the digitalization of information about the architectural ensemble of the Kiev-Peshchersk monastery were created. For several years, systematic planned work for creating digital copies of the stock museum collection of the preserve has been carried out. I detail the information about the digitalization of museum objects of the historical and cultural heritage from the National Preserve Kiev-Peshchersk Lavra collection. The preserve keeps records and documentation of museum objects in electronic form, for which there is special software. In particular, the software allows us to add images of items and create up-to-date passport of storage units. The preserve workers carry out photofixation and scanning of museum objects of various storage groups. To create digital copies of objects from the photos, negatives, graphics groups, flatbed scanners are usually used. This year, we were able to create digital copies of more than 3,000 items. To create control images of items from the archive, painting, graphics, storage groups, we use in particular the document camera scanner received from the British partner. There is very helpful equipment for the quick preparation of accompanying documentation for the museum value evacuation. Perhaps the most effective tool for creating digital copies for us is photography. I want to emphasize that we use provided cameras, memory cards, studio lights, backgrounds, color schemes, laptop, etc., to high-quality photofixation of objects from different storage groups, metalwork and textile items, paintings, graphics, plants, sculptures, portraits, archaeology objects, etc. The effectiveness of the digitalization process directly depends on the war condition. We face daily challenges, including Russian missile and drone attacks, a lack of heating, electricity, and communication. However, we continue to work on creating digital copies on museum objects, primarily thanks to equipment received from British colleagues. We have already recorded hundreds of exhibits thanks to your help. It is important that in the condition of full-scale war, the preserve in place not only accumulates the received digital files, but also fills the electronic database of museum objects, clarify attribution, conduct research, conservation and popularization of the museum collections through online projects. We sincerely thank our British colleagues for helping us to preserve and research into the historical and cultural heritage of Ukraine in the condition of war with the terrorist country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anna and her team, for the presentation. Before Anna agreed to contribute a presentation to our talk today, ICOM UK have submitted a joint proposal with ICOM Ukraine, the University of the West of England and the National Preserve Kiev-Pechersk Lavra to secure funds to expand digitization of the collection by purchasing more expensive specialist equipment. And Anna has already mentioned this proposal now. I do note from the names and the list of participants today that Anastasia Chevindichenko, the Vice Chair of ICOM Ukraine, is also in the audience. Thank you for being here today, Anastasia, and just to acknowledge in person that I received your email this morning. This week, we received the very, very welcome and good news that our joint application for an ICOM special grant for this digitization project has been successful. The project will create an electronic catalogue of the movable monuments of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra and provide digital access to this heritage of outstanding universal value. It will safeguard the historical collections by facilitating proof of ownership and record the present condition of the collections. Thank you to everybody involved in this application, which is some much needed good news during such difficult times for Ukraine.
Thank you, Christian. Totally agree with that. Some much needed good news. Thank you to everybody for their contributions. We do have time now for questions, so please do keep your questions coming in the chat. I'll just raise the first question now, which has come from Mark D, who says, a great brief thanks. Is there any evidence that in looting Ukrainian museums and galleries, Russia is destroying Ukrainian icons, or are we simply witnessing their theft? I don't know who would like to respond to that, whether that might be Maria or Ludmila, or even whether Anastasia might be able to say a few words.
Okay. So there are actually so many notes and evidences that Bolsheviks destroyed all Ukrainian and not also Ukrainian religious heritage during their actual work, and that's how actually that's how started National Museum in Lviv. It was presented. It was basically collection of saved icons by Metropolitan Andrei Sheptetsky. Yes, Metropolitan Andrei, which was very important to save and to protect from churches which were just, you know, burn it. And even now we see evidence that in the occupied villages and cities from Russia, we found in just empty museums even now. So yes, of course, there are so many evidences, but it also needs much more time to talk that's another very hard conversation.
Thank you, Maria. And I think on the UNESCO website, there is a list that's regularly updated for buildings that have been destroyed. So we'll see if before the end of the talk we can find a link to that list for people. Do keep your questions coming. I actually have a question for Ludmila. Ludmila, fantastic introduction to the Shevchenko Library and Archive in London. A lot of people who I mention it to aren't even aware of its existence, so it's fantastic that you're able to introduce it. I wondered whether there are any particular artifacts that you're currently collecting, anything about the war now, or any family archives from diaspora members that you're collecting.
Yes. Yes, we do. We're collecting some materials, and we're not only collecting some, we're also preparing and gave a huge archive last year. We moved it to Ukraine, to Kiev. There is an archive, Central Archive of Foreign Ukrainica, and the archive of a politician and member of British Parliament, Stefan Terlecki, was prepared, and we gave it to the State Ukrainian Archive in Kiev. And also it was planned to prepare a documentary exhibition about Stefan Terlecki in Kiev. But, well, it didn't happen because of the war. Firstly, because of the COVID and then the war. But we will do it in the future, definitely.
Thank you. And if there is anybody in the audience today that would like to visit the library and archive in London, presumably a place needs to be booked in advance. They just need to email you for permission.
Just by email, yeah. And fantastic. They can visit us. We just moved back, and we still, you can see all these notes. We're still unpacking stuff and trying to locate it to the right place.
Yes, you said that you'd recently.
Yeah,
you said you'd recently been refurbished, so that's fantastic news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are some more questions coming through. So from Lisa Morrill at UE, the University of the West of England, she says, thank you so much for the wonderful talks. Are you getting assistance with the emergency stabilization of damaged immovable heritage? I think this question may have been better answered by Anna, who is unable to join us today. Obviously, I don't know whether Anastasia might be able to say something, or if not, we can find out and reply separately to you, Lisa. I think possibly because Anna is not here today, we'll have to find a separate response for you, Lisa. But just to say thank you also to Lisa because of your help with co-fund for the joint proposal for the grant that's been accepted for the Kiev-Peshchersk Lavra. Another question here from Victoria Kingston. Thank you, a fascinating series of talks. I assume there are many Ukrainian artifacts in the collections of Russian museums. Do we know if there's any evidence that they're being damaged or neglected? These are some fascinating questions. I'm not sure whether the speakers last week may have been.
You mean in Russia?
Yeah.
I don't think so. They will. I think they keep in all the exhibits as usual, because it's historical heritage. Yes,
we know that there's a lot of looting. We don't necessarily know how they're using the Ukrainian artifacts that were already in their collections.
Maria,
yes?
I'm sorry, Anna is in the audience here now.
Anna's joined us.
notice. I wonder if Anna has a comment there, perhaps.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Anna. You've made it.
Hello.
So we had, just before you joined us, I don't know whether you heard the question, but there are a couple of questions that you may be able to help with. So one is from Lisa Moll saying, are you able to get assistance with emergency stabilization of damaged immovable heritage with buildings and so on?
Can you just please
replace? Of course. So we wondered whether you were able to get funding to help with buildings that have been damaged in Ukraine.
Actually, if I understand correctly, we have in our preserve we don't have fortunately damaged building, but in other have. And if I understood correctly, my colleagues, for example, now work with UNESCO funds for just in Cardiff region, for example, and Kiev region, and just try to find some money to rebuild houses. But I'm not sure that it's so easy. Actually, we have a lot of collections that have already destroyed, and if we can, for example, rebuild building, we never can any opportunity to renew this collection. Actually, if I understood correctly, is your question, no?
That's it. That's fantastic. Thank you. And there is another question that we hope that you may be able to help us with as well. So apologies, you've only just managed to join us, so we hope that we don't put too much pressure on you. But we wondered if you could say a little bit about the current state of the digitization of archives in Ukraine and the importance of digitization. Obviously, everybody has seen your presentation, so thank you very much for that. But if you could say why digitization is important, that would be great.
Actually, it's extremely important. For example, we have such opportunity due to your support. For example, we have the scanner, and actually some during the summer. During summer, we have a lot of work before this. We have such big problem with electricity. For example, here it just it appears. So I have such just a connection and internet. And also I knew that a lot of funds and organization now works with our archive, central archive service in Ukraine, and another museum have such opportunity. And also, for example, if we are talking about Kiev Regional Museum, my colleagues from National Academy of Science that previous year had some fund grant from Canada, and they create some copies of photos, for example, in Borodyanka Museum and also in Ivankiv Museum. And now these photos just destroyed, and they create, my colleagues from Institute of History of Ukraine from National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine just printed a new one. And actually in my museum and professional opinion, it's better just have this information. Of course, we never, if we just lost this masterpieces, this icons, this documents, this textile pieces, etc., etc., it's never returned back. But actually, digitalization give us opportunity to save information. It's extremely important. So thank you very much that you support our organization and our museum archives and give such opportunity to save information. It's our memory, it's our history, it's extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very eloquent way of explaining the importance of digitization. So really, really appreciate that. Sadly, that's probably all we have time for today. We could talk for so much longer. We hope that everybody here has enjoyed our series and learning about Ukraine and the importance of protecting Ukrainian artifacts and cultural history. Thank you also to all of our speakers. There are so many topics and projects we could have talked about, but obviously with three talks we had to refine the topics. One of the topics that we could have talked about was rehabilitating bats, for instance, during war in Ukraine. That's a talk that I spotted on Eventbrite. A reminder of today's key takeaways. Ukrainian culture is unique and special in its own way, so please continue to champion the diverse cultural history and culture of Ukraine and other former countries that are living in the shadow of Russia. On behalf of ICOM UK, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, Ludmila Pakashk, Maria Saluk, Anna Yanenko, of course, indeed all of the speakers for this season of talks. Just a reminder that any donations that are made, the money will go straight to our colleagues in ICOM Poland who are supporting cultural heritage professionals who are fleeing Ukraine. So over to Christian for the final thanks.
Thanks, Maria. ICOM have helped coordinate several initiatives to support museums in Ukraine already, including earlier this year providing assistance to get an entire lorry full of conservation materials from the UK delivered to Ukrainian museums. ICOM UK remains committed to supporting our partners in Ukraine and around Europe to help protect Ukrainian heritage. It remains for me to thank our partners, especially the Ukrainian Institute in Kiev and the Ukrainian Institute in London, for supporting this event series. Thank you also to the amazing Maria Blazinski for giving up her time for organizing these events, Dana for her technical and logistical support, and all our listeners today for attending and your engaging questions. I know there are more, and we will be happy to continue these conversations. All talks in this series have been recorded and will be available free of charge online on the ICOM UK YouTube channel. We very much hope you enjoyed the event today. We'd be delighted to receive any feedback, and just as a very final reminder again that all your donations will go to ICOM Poland to fund the support Ukrainian cultural heritage professionals fleeing the war in Ukraine. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.